Hi, I'm Michael Taylor, and it's my absolute enormous pleasure to be here today with Apprentify to welcome you all to Circle Square. I know people keep saying this about live events, but it's just so good to be back amongst each other again after everything that we've been through. So I'm delighted that we've got you here today, whether you're from a digital agency, whether you're from an apprentice organisation, or whether a particularly warm welcome if you're an apprentice as well. Because hopefully you can share some of your truth about what the experience has been like. Because the whole point of this evening's event, or this afternoon's event, it is evening now, isn't it? Now it's getting darker, is attracting the next generation of talent so that digital agencies can have that cutting edge, particularly here in Manchester, where I think there's a lot of ambition. There's a lot of ambition for the sector to be offering quality work to businesses large and small. And we're here, I guess, to demystify some of the background noise that goes on in and around employing an apprentice. So I want it to be an interactive event. We're going to have we're going to hear from some fantastic speakers today. So just to get us all really kicked off, I want to invite Jonathan Fitzhugh, the chairman of Apprentify, who's just going to come and give us a bit of an introduction about what it's all about. So give him a really warm welcome, our first speaker today. Use that one. I know that one works.
Oh, right. I've got this one then.
That's for them.
Oh, that's for them, is it? Okay. If I put it there, can you all hear me? That's good. Welcome to Circle Square. Bit of a strange name, isn't it? But I didn't really have an agenda about what I was going to speak about today. But the first thing that crossed my mind is a parable of a story that happened on the way here. Because I was in the car with my son, who I think is a terrible driver, because guess what? He's inexperienced. He's only been driving for a year. And the main road closed, and we got sent down this rabbit warren of little streets. And he said, "Dad, your car's very wide. You need to take it easy." I was going, "Oh, shut up. What do you know? What do you know about driving? I've been driving for years." And proceeded to scrape the side off a car at the next bend. And he looked at me and just said, "You plonker. I told you this was going to happen." So, experience is a double-edged sword. There's a lot of people who are experienced at being very bad at what they do, as I demonstrated in my car on the way here. So my background is I founded a company called Pareto Law that found sales talent from the graduate community back in 1996. 25 years later and 25,000 sales graduates placed, I left that business and got involved with Apprentify. And the key differences between the businesses is that Pareto was all about graduates because there wasn't a talent pool that was getting trained in any other method. And what happened was Tony Blair had, in his fine government, whatever your political aspirations, had said everyone should go to university. Although I was reminded it was 50%, but it sounded like everyone should go to university. So when the government sort of started trying to, what I call, democratize careers by not saying you have to have a degree and not saying you have to go to university, it got a bit of a lukewarm response back in 2017, and many businesses considered it a tax, because a 0.5% levy was put on their businesses to cover the costs of providing these things. So it got a bit of a lukewarm start. But since then, it has evolved, and with people like the Juice Academy and Apprentify and many other businesses, it's become the way forward for young people if they want to get started straight away. So if I do the parable of young people again, one of my sons is at Bristol University. He wants to do a degree, or I think he just wants to live away from home and party. His twin brother is working at Apprentify, helping apprentices get jobs because he doesn't want to be at university. It doesn't suit him. He wants to start his career now and get on with things. So apprenticeships allow young people to learn digital, creative, sales, a whole plethora of skills without going down that traditional route of university. And it creates fantastic opportunities, particularly in the digital space, which is where we operate. And I'm really proud of the achievements Apprentify have made in helping young people get on their career journey. And interestingly, going back to Mr. Blair, his son Ewan is gamekeeper turned poacher, or is it poacher turned gamekeeper? Because he said his dad speaks rubbish, and he set up an apprenticeship provider called Multiverse that's a successful business as well. So, you know, I don't know what their conversations over dinner sound like, but who knows? So to me, apprentices are the way forward. I'm really proud to be associated with the business. We're doing lots of great work, and we've got some fantastic success stories where individuals have come to join our programs. And what I really love about apprenticeships is the coaching. A lot of training, you get immersed for 2 weeks in a training course, they're kicked out the other end, and a lot of it's in one ear and out the other ear because you've not had a chance to actually try those skills. And we all know that, you know, in important roles in life, like airline pilots, they never stop getting trained month in, month out. And that's what you get with an apprenticeship. You get coached. So each of your apprentices is coached all the way through that journey rather than just getting a big load of training at one end. So it really does work. We've got some fantastic results coming out of Apprentify. And, well, I'm rambling on a bit here, but I think the message is apprentices are good for your business. And just because you're older and more experienced, as my journey here today exemplified really, you're never too smart to listen to a youngster sat next to you who's telling you to slow down and think a bit more about what you're doing. So thank you. Right.
Well, thank you very much, Jonathan. That's got us off to a flying start. You know, the whole purpose of today, we're going to hear from 3 or 4 speakers, and then we're going to have the opportunity for you to maybe ask some questions. I'll ask some questions. I should have introduced myself a bit more fully. My background is I'm a journalist. I've done it since I left the university down the road in 1988. I've worked in Australia, in London, in Bristol, but the happiest and most productive time of my life was working here in Manchester for a business group called Insider. And I still broadcast on the radio. I do a podcast series. And if you like music, listen to Tameside Radio, Sunday night, 9 till 11, Music Therapy with Michael Taylor and Neil Summers. That's the plug over. But I just want to agree with Jonathan. You should never, ever stop learning. And that's the whole spirit of apprenticeships, I think. That's the lifelong journey that so many of you are involved in, either as an apprentice yourself or as an employer who's looking to train people to give your businesses that competitive edge. So I'm going to be introducing Sandy Lindsay, we're going to be hearing from Pete Coates, from iProspect. Sandy, of course, from Tangerine PR and the Juice Academy. He's got an amazing story to tell. I'm just tantalising you. She's not coming next. It's going to be after that. We're going to be hearing from Brian from Venn, which is a business named after a diagram. And but first of all, before we get all them up on a panel, before we hear their stories, I really want to introduce the founder of Apprentify, Paul Drew, to tell us his story. Paul.
Thank you. Hi, everyone, and welcome. So, yeah, a little bit of background of me. So, 20 years or just over, I was on the other side, and I was a marketing director, digital marketing director. I worked right up to the e-commerce marketing director group, looking after travel, funerals, flowers, cars, everything. It was an eclectic mix of products I was looking after. But when I was on that side of the business, the one thing I really knew that when I was a success was when I had the best people in the team and the best talent. And that was one of the reasons why I set up Apprentify, because I knew that actually digital talent today is really tough to find that talent in, especially in places like Manchester and Leeds and London, Liverpool, where the talent pool is really, really tight. Actually finding digital talent today is hard, and keeping them as well once you've got them on. So one of the things we did when we set Apprentify up, we looked at why apprenticeships worked and why apprenticeships didn't work, and what really employers wanted and what digital agencies wanted, because we knew that one of the core areas and the core sort of silos we were going to target was digital marketing agencies, and there's hundreds, if not thousands, in Greater Manchester. And I went out and spoke to lots of employers, and the one thing that kept coming back was actually finding good talent is really tough. And some of the speakers here, I was a client of theirs. So when I was at Pareto Law, I was a client of iProspect, and then digital as well. So I knew that actually finding good talent is really, really key. So Apprentify tried to set a different route for how we could find talent for UK businesses. And what we do is we don't work like a normal recruitment business or a normal apprenticeship business. Normal apprenticeship businesses and recruitment businesses take a CV, do advertise a job, take a CV, look at it for a couple of hours, telephone interview them, put them into interview. What Apprentify look to do is we have developed a digital assessment centre that helps identify the core competencies to be good at digital. So we assess them on blog writing, on coding, on analytics, on communication skills, on social media. We give them general knowledge quizzes to come back, and we ask them what is trending at the moment in certain social media silos and various different things. So from all this, we have a big matrix of data that allows us to identify where these individuals are, because apprentices usually come with very little experience. They can come with a lot of experience. And what we're trying to find is where their skill sets, their natural skill sets lie, and how we can, with the apprenticeship and with the employer in mind, help develop those individuals from those rough diamonds into those shining stars. And we've got some examples with some of the apprentices today. And actually, I was speaking to Pete earlier. Me and Pete went for a beer in 2019, and I was trying to sell the wonderful world of Apprentify right at the start of the journey. And when we were standing outside, I won't steal his thunder, but now his idea of an apprentice is totally different from what we spoke about in 2019. Because we've been able to prove with iProspect and Dentsu as an agency how we can deliver really good talent that also meets a lot of other business KPIs. So whether that's diversity, whether it's age, whether it's new ideas, whether it's geography, we've got a solution that can help agencies. And actually now, agency apprentices in Apprentify take up 48% of our apprentices are actually within agencies. Every agency has got a different requirement and a different way of working. And we've been able to develop a program that's agile and an assessment centre that will deliver the right numbers and the right type of people that really does, hopefully, 9 times out of 10, provide the output at the end of the apprenticeship and throughout the apprenticeship, where we've got really great members of the business. And investing in apprenticeships allows agencies to provide that level of development for the staff. So they're not coming in to an agency and trying to get a year's experience and then disappearing to another agency for more money. They actually feel invested in, and they last longer than, I'm going to say, traditional non-apprentices, because we've invested. Both Apprentify and the agencies invested in their staff. So it really does provide future-proof staff members that will rise to really any requirements for an agency, because within the apprenticeship, Apprentify have designed these extra, we call them paths to mastery. So there's extra learning to push the apprentice down an area of expertise. So whether that's social, whether that's SEO, whether it's web design or coding or data, and we're able to actually work with the employer. So throughout the apprenticeship, they're not just getting the apprenticeship learning, they're also getting extra learning to get them future-proofed for their career after the apprenticeship and further on along. And 92% of our apprentices are still within the agency after 2 years and even longer. So we can provide really long-term employment and talent requirements for businesses. and we've really become a success in not just in Greater Manchester, but across England and the areas where there's real talent shortages. And hopefully some of the speakers today will talk about how together we've been able to deliver this for their agencies. So thank you very much.
I didn't know many of the other people who are speaking here today, apart from when we've met through the course of preparing for today's event. But I have known Sandy Lindsay, our next speaker, for the best part of 20 years, which does make me feel a little bit old. I always still think of myself as a young person. But I first knew Sandy when she set up her business, Tangerine PR. And I was the editor of a business magazine in Manchester. And I'll be bluntly honest with you, people would set up PR agencies any day of the week. You know, they'd come and they'd go. But Sandy's agency, there was something special about it. There was something that really caught my eye at the time. And it wasn't that long before her agency, Tangerine, were getting to the top of the league tables for one of the best agencies in Manchester. Their client list was one to absolutely die for. And they completely broke the big three agencies in Manchester, which were, if I remember rightly, Staniforth, Communique, and Mason Williams. I think it's only Mason. I don't even know if any of them are even going anymore, Sandy. But absolutely, what an amazing business. And then she's done two things which actually cut her above any other business boss that you might meet on any day of the week. One is she's done the whole John Lewis model and handed the business over to the people that have made it the success that it is. I think that's just absolutely tremendous. And I'm not going to steal her thunder for what she's going to talk about. But then the other thing that she did is she started the Juice Academy, which absolutely revolutionized the way I think a lot of people started to think about apprenticeships. Even if it's not just the volume of people that would go through the Juice Academy, through the different cohorts that they've got running at any one time, but actually it switched on a lot of other smart people in communications and digital marketing to think apprenticeships is the way to go, because if someone as respected as Sandy Lindsay has grabbed this opportunity by the scruff of its neck, then it's got to be worth looking at. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're in for a bit of a treat now, because you're going to hear the Sandy Lindsay story after that build-up. Ladies and gentlemen, Sandy Lindsay. Did I miss anything out, mate?
Michael, you made me blush. Hi, everybody. Do I need? I don't need this, do I? No? No, that's fine. Yeah, so as Michael said, 20 years ago, almost to the day, actually, I started Tangerine. It's not Tangerine PR anymore, Michael. Tangerine.
No, it was back then, though, wasn't it?
I know it was back then. Tangerine PR back then. And the reason I set up the business was to prove singularly that we could run a PR business that was both ethical and profitable. You didn't have to choose. And back then, that was quite a big thing. It was quite a different thing. And we did well, as Michael said. We started to grow and we started to gain clients. And one of the best decisions we actually made was switching our partner to Apprentify, just to make Paul blush for a change. Because these guys really know their apples. They are amazing, and they've given us a bit of a beating up and kicked us into touch and worked with us and shout. Sally Ann's laughing because she's the worst of the lot. She scares the life out of me at the back there. But that's what you need in apprenticeships. You need to know what you're about, because this is to be taken seriously. This is young people that we're talking about here. And while we were doing great work and we were bringing them through, there were things we could have done better, and we were constantly learning. I think the biggest learning things for me as an agency owner, as I was, in taking on apprenticeships, because obviously I had the two hats on. I had being the trainer, but also being the agency that was taking some of the apprentices from our program as well, is that apprenticeship, everybody in the agency world, certainly in the PR world, I know what it's like in other parts of the world, was going on and on about diversity. How do we bring different people into our sector? It's always the same people. And if you'd looked around Tangerine Towers 10 years ago, you'd see a sea of white, middle-class females, basically, all university educated. Nothing wrong with that. But there was no diversity. So at the time, I think one of our biggest clients was Iceland, the retailer. And what you want when you're brainstorming a retailer like Iceland is you want people who've actually shopped in Iceland, not Waitrose, because you've got to actually brainstorm and you've got to bring it to life. And that's one of the things that was really eye-opening for me, was all of a sudden we'd got Johnny from Urmston and Nathan from Salford, and they came in and they were ballsy, and they were brash, and they were absolutely fantastic. And they had really bad but brilliant ideas because they had no framework from which to actually be involved in brainstorm. But they brought this creativity and this different take to our brainstorms and to our office, and it was really refreshing. So that was completely accidentally, if I'm honest, but that still happens. The sorts of people that you see coming through apprenticeships are quite different in some ways from the sorts of grads, but actually now grads can be apprentices, so it's all merged in. And the talk tonight is how brilliant apprentices are, and they are, but I think grads are brilliant as well. And what I'm saying is you don't need to choose. You can. I think the best environment is we've got brilliant grads with all of their analytical thinking that they've been taught at university, and then you've got these fresh kids who are straight out of school into an apprenticeship or straight out of college into an apprenticeship, and they all bring different things. When the law changed, the rules changed to bring some grads into the classroom at the Juice Academy, it was fantastic. It changed everything. And this is the great thing, is the thing that things are constantly evolving and changing, and that's what we need. And that was the reason why we agreed to do this program, is because apprentices need to be in the real world. As you know, in digital marketing, in the world of digital, things are changing all the time. So they can't really be trained in college to do how to do digital marketing, in my opinion. It needs to be trained by people who are actively doing the job. And what we do is we also layer that with what we know they need to do and to survive in our world. So, for instance, they need to be resilient. They need to understand, that in a fast-paced environment, things will go wrong, and they need to know how to do that. So we layer their technical training with resilience training, with teamwork training. We even bring a nutritionist in who teaches them what to put in their body during the day, so that will affect their executive brain. We have a bank manager comes in and talks to them about how to spend and save their money. All the things I wish somebody told me, basically, at 18. Would I have listened? Who knows? But basically, it's all about real world. And that's what's brilliant about apprenticeships, is that you go and learn a bit, as you were saying, Michael. You go and learn a bit, you apply it in the real world, you go and learn a bit, you apply it in the real world, and it really sinks in. And so we've absolutely loved our journey. It's almost 10 years. I can't believe that. It feels like about 3 years. But we've absolutely loved it. And a few thanks to people in the room. We've got people from Social Chain here. I think you've taken about 15 of our apprentices over the years. And people come back because our apprentices land. They tend to stay around. We had a boot camp yesterday where we brought a new load of apprentices in. And we had some guys in the room from Checked Media, and they've had about 10 of ours over the years. And they were saying that there were people who have been with them 8-9 years. They're now running the US operation or the Dubai operation from a standing start 8 years ago as an apprentice. So these kids just need a break, and they will grab it with both hands, and they'll be loyal and they'll stay with you. So if anybody has any questions about any of that afterwards, well, I'm going to be here anyway. Just come and talk to me. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Sandy. So, guys, I know I keep mentioning, that I'm a proud Mancunian and all the rest of it, but I think it's really important that we think a little bit broader than that. We're not just parochial. There's many of you that I've already met today who are from different parts of, at least the north of England. But we're going to hear from Pete Coates now, who set up iProspect and runs the operations across 3 UK locations: Newcastle, Leeds and Stafford. So Pete's set up all sorts of different operations in the whole digital sphere, be it PPC, social, display. So he's got a great truth to tell and a great set of examples about how apprentices have helped with iProspect and how that all works. So give him a round of applause and a big warm welcome. You might need a microphone, even if it's just as a prop.
Cool. I'll stick it there. I'm quite gobby anyway. So I'm going to start by positing a theory for all the agency people in the room. Could be completely wrong with this, but it generally tends to turn out true. That most of us never expected to end up within this world, right? We just kind of landed here. There was some decision that happened at some point in our career that leads us to sort of being within an agency. I think there's very, very few people who, when they're thinking about leaving school, whether that's to go to university or whether to go and get a job, I go, do you know what I want to do? I want to work in an advertising agency. I want to work in digital. And I did some work with some people who work in the career service in schools in Leeds. And it became clear to me that the kids, sort of when they're starting to have those career conversations within schools, are getting the same advice that I was getting in sort of the mid-90s. You know, if you're smart or if you're on for some decent grades and you want to get a job that earns good money, you want to be a lawyer, you want to be a doctor, you want to be an accountant, you want to go to university and you want to do these things. And those things still ring true. You know, they are great jobs and, you know, you probably do need to go to university in order to get them. But nobody's talking to kids in schools about careers in digital, right? I don't think we're doing enough in schools to teach digital skills. I don't think we're talking to kids about the potential that they've got in order to sort of really go out and earn some good money working in an industry like ours very quickly within their careers if they kind of get into that space. So that kind of creates, I think it creates an interesting dynamic within our industry. I mean, if I think of my own personal experience, I did a law degree at university because when I was 18, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. Within a year of I absolutely did not want to be a lawyer, but I thought I'm on this train now, so I'll finish the degree and then the world is my oyster. I then decided I wanted to be a journalist, but I couldn't afford to do the master's degree, so I got a job at the BBC doing subtitles, and that didn't quite get me into sort of becoming the broadcast journalist that I wanted to. And my cousin worked for an agency in Edinburgh, and he was out all the time, having the time of his life. And I thought, that sounds great to me. So I managed to get a job at a media agency. And 16 years later, here I am talking to you all. I've been on the same employment contract for 13 years. And the job that I started at was part of the network. It's been part of this bigger network that I work for now, which is like massive. I flew back in from New York yesterday, having spent a week working on a massive £400 million pitch for a global piece of business, which there's no way I would have thought I would be doing that a couple of years back because I'm part of this big business and part of this big network. But the job that I started at was an agency that was partially owned by the network that I work for. It was 50% owned by two stakeholders who'd set it up and were running it reasonably independently with no interference from the bigger business or the bigger network. But they both left school at 16. One got a job as a typist with a media agency, who developed into an account exec and then account manager, account director. The other one started on a YTS scheme back in the 80s with an advertising agency in Bradford, and they got together and said, you know what, we want to start a business. So they started a business in Leeds that was partially owned by this big network. And I got a job 13 years ago working in a small group of about 20 people when I started. And that was the first time in my life I'd ever been given responsibility for like interviewing people and hiring people. And I think what we quickly discovered is actually look, our market's always been challenged for resource. I know it's quite acute right now. Our market's always been challenged for resource. And we really struggled to find people with experience that we felt were delivering at the level that we wanted them to. We really wanted to set the standards high within our business, and we really struggled to find people who could do that for us. So we began to recruit at entry level and literally start from scratch with people. And to begin with, we were focused on graduates. You know, we were almost exclusively recruiting graduates in, and we would look for people who showed a bit of strong aptitude for the kind of skills we wanted, but had a really good attitude, who were quite entrepreneurial, who were prepared to roll their sleeves up and get stuck in. And even today, most of the people who I still work with today, most of the people that report into me, we recruited as graduates. We brought them in at entry level, and they've been with us, on a journey over 10, 9, 8, 7 years, whatever, that we've developed from that level up into some of the most senior people within our business and organization today. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, as we were being sucked into this big organization, our HR director came to us and said, look, we're cool with you continuing to focus on graduates, but we want you to start thinking about how you can hire apprentices. And we went into that with all the terrible biases that you thought you might have. We thought, what we're going to get with apprentices, is it going to be kids who've left school and don't really know what to do, and the mum and dad are giving them a kick up the arse and telling them that they have to go out and get a job or whatever. And And we went into it with completely the wrong attitude. We ran a couple of recruitment processes and we hired 2 apprentices initially. One of them ticked every box for what we thought we were going to get. One of them was absolutely brilliant. You know, he hadn't been to university. He'd left school a year previously, and we taught him everything. And he. And when we went in to do our next round of apprentice recruitment, our old HR director said something which has kind of stuck with me ever since, which was, when you're thinking about hiring apprentices versus hiring graduates, you've just got to have the right expectations in terms of what you go into it with. The first thing is, apprentices can come from everywhere. They're not all school leavers is the first thing to bear in mind. But a lot of them are. And I think the way she put it, and I stick by this, is that when you're recruiting graduates versus apprentices, what you'll probably get from graduates is people with a bit more analytical rigor, because they've spent 3 years, you know, reading stuff and being asked to regurgitate that and form arguments and do all of that kind of stuff, which is really valuable and really useful. And you might get somebody with 3 years life experience that maybe lived away from home. They've had to fend for themselves and kind of look after themselves for a few years that you might not get with people who are leaving school. But other than that, you're pretty much getting the same people. So as an employer, working with an apprenticeship provider, what you might want to do is you might want to try to work out what your apprenticeship provider is going to support with, what gaps they're going to fill, what they're going to do from a training perspective. Work at how you can fill those gaps yourself in terms of bringing people on and adding those training gaps in around the edges. Fast forward to today, obviously the business I'm part of has been sucked into this massive organization that exists in like 120 countries worldwide. But we now operate not at individual location levels, but as one business across the UK. We've got quite a significant advantage versus our competitors in the network agency space, in that we've got 6 UK locations that we operate out of in London, Stafford, Manchester, Newcastle, Leeds and Edinburgh, right? So we've got 6 talent markets that we can go into in order to be able to try to bring talent in and develop them. And what we've done now is recognizing that there's such a skills gap in the market. I was talking to a recruiter yesterday who was trying to sell me his wares, so he could be exaggerating, but he reckoned that he had, for every experienced candidate that he had, he'd have 10 to 15 jobs available that those people could go after. We are in a market. We've gone from a market where we felt like, you know, we could sort of get access to talent pretty much whenever we needed to it being a complete employees market that we're operating in. So we have to think radically about how we start to fill those gaps and start to build a bit more of a longer term strategy. It's how do we go and develop the next generation of talent within our industry? And that's what we've done. We set up the Dentsu Academy in November last year, which was designed to actually, on a reasonably industrial scale, build a program whereby we could bring entry-level people into our business, a mix of apprentices and graduates who are coming in cohorts in different locations around the country. We've built a fairly sort of rigid training program that we're bringing those people on, but ultimately that's matched against the kind of sort of training that Apprentify, you know, provides, one of our apprenticeship providers, so that those two things blend with each other, and then we literally put them on the job to learn the rest of the skills, and they develop through and start working with experienced teams of people within our business. And since November last year, we've taken on 75 people in the UK in various different locations onto that scheme, and it's proved to be a huge success. It was a bit bumpy to begin with, as these things always are, but we've got to a really, really strong place. And you know, apprentices are the lifeblood of that. We've completely, Paul said it, we've completely transformed our view of what apprentices can do for us and what apprentices can provide for our business. And I think, you know, moving forward, that's going to be the area that we continue to focus on investing in for the longer term. So yeah, I couldn't speak highly enough of apprentices, and more than happy to answer any more specific questions anybody's got a little bit later on.
Brilliant, amazing. Well, this is great. So I hope you're all enjoying it. Is the energy level still high? Still enjoying it? Yeah, great. Well, no pressure, Brian. So yeah, Brian is the founder of Venn, and going to tell us about their story, particularly just kind of really revolutionising the whole way in which recruitment marketing has been done. So over to you. Ryan.
Be prepared to be underwhelmed. They don't get bank managers in Venn. Thanks. We don't get nutritionists. We don't do £400 million pitches. I feel really bad now. Look, Venn, I am a failed PE teacher, turned recruiter, sales, marketing, and fell in to start my own business because I was unemployable. And maybe that's why I've been invited to talk. We don't recruit on the same scale these guys do. We've got that half the story isn't that interesting. But I think what was interesting for us was attitude. I was part of the graduate programme at Pareto that Jonathan founded. And my upbringing into the world of business was always kind of attitude-based. I didn't have the right education. I didn't have the right pedigree to do anything other than pick up the phone and sell or send out emails or do campaigns. So I think the way in which we were taught, the way we were trained, the way we were brought into the world of business, I've never been so grateful because it changed the whole path of my career. I literally was going to become a PE teacher, and then suddenly I was exposed to this world of business in Manchester, and I've never looked back since. So for me, the kind of attitude side of apprenticeships has never really left me. And I think to this day, there was 3 reasons why we buddied up with Apprentify. Was one, I think the funding, if I'm being completely honest, is a small business. I think it's quite intimidating when you hear the iProspect Dentsu story. It's kind of, how the hell do I take on 75 people? I think financially we just couldn't match what their opportunity was, what their offices were. And you are competing for the same talent. Pete and I will be competing for the same 18, 19-year-old, 21-year-old. And how the hell does small Venn? We only employ 40 people. But for me, 40 is quite good. I'm quite happy with 40. And maybe it'll be 45, maybe it'll be 50. So when you're competing for this talent, it's really difficult. And then you get social chain with a ball swamp and a slide and a tree house. Don't stand a chance. So what do you do? And I'm putting Fisher Price slide in my 20 quid. Hopefully that'll do. And it's just dead hard to compete for talent. So I think for us, the Apprentify model was just raw talent, raw attitude. And like I say, I think financially, for me, if I'm being completely honest, if there are any small businesses like mine who are looking to grow their business, it's such a cost-effective way. You know, we have to budget 4.5, 5 grand, 20% perm fee of a grad salary at 22, 23 grand. So every time you hire some raw talent into your business, you're paying 5 grand recruitment fee up. So suddenly I found out it was funded. I changed my attitude away from grad recruitment to apprenticeship recruitment very, very quickly. Thought this will do me. In some instances, you get cash back. Am I right? It was. So I'll be honest. I did it as a financially driven decision. It was a cheaper way to scale my business. And we took on 10, 12, 15 people quite quickly because financially we could afford to do it. Don't get me wrong, we still paid the same salary. It was just the fee really supported a small business owner like mine to grow and go from 15 staff to 20 staff to 40 staff. So that was the first reason. I think the second reason was the actual model around the training and support. I actually agree with Jonathan. I think you can get fast-fed a lot of content really quickly. And I think I was that naive and arrogant at 21. I believed I knew it all. And I very quickly realised that as you get older, you know less and less and less. So the programme that Apprenticeships offer, I actually do agree with. I think the fact that it is 12, 13 months of your life, you need to earn your stripes. You have to go through the trials and tribulations. You have to adopt. And I think for us being in digital, I don't know how everybody else feels, but I am not an expert. You know, we are in the digital space. We now have pivoted away from traditional agency to SaaS. So we've got a tech business, we've got a marketing platform, we've got a creative business. I can't even keep up with what the iPhones are nowadays. It's now iPhone 14 apparently. So to keep up with tech is nearly impossible. SEO, PPC, content, what's Google changing next? What will they failed at next? What will they try and sell you next? There's so much to keep up with. So I think having apprentices in your business, they actually genuinely know more than me now because they're living and breathing it way quicker than I can keep up with. But I think the fact it's changing so quickly, what you studied and learned in January has almost changed by July and August. So I think you've got this continuous support and Apprentify's coaches, their assessors, the level of professionalism is second to none. It's a phenomenal business. And I think that's my second point about the support side of it. It's the actual ongoing support that we can't offer. We don't have an L&D department. We don't have a head of training. We're just not big enough. I can't afford to have an L&D business. But what I do have is a true partner who supports them on their journey. So when we talk about mental health, we've been through a 2-year pandemic. I literally can't phone them as much as I'd love to. I'd love to speak to them more, but I know I've got an Apprentify provider who does that. They do check in with them monthly. They have one-to-one coaching sessions online. And that as a kind of value add is massive, especially in today's marketplace where the youngsters think they actually want to work at home. I prefer they come into the office because I can physically see they're okay and I can chat to them at the water cooler and I can have a laugh with them in the office, but the world's changed. We can't do that anymore. So to actually have a provider check in and coach them is huge. So it's not just about the funding, it's not just about the learning. For me, it's not just about the attitude, it's what Apprentify do when it came to the coaching. I didn't expect that to be as integral as it has been to our success. And I do agree with Paul, the reason why they're here 2 years down the line is they get that extracurricular support, I guess you would class it as. So I wouldn't, again, if you're a small business owner like me, financially, yes, it's lucrative, it's supportive. I think the fact you can train and mould the talent, that goes without saying, you're here for that already. But don't underestimate how important the training has been in terms of our success, because the young ones do need that additional level of support that we can't always give them, especially over Teams or Zoom. It's hard. And Apprentify do have an exceptional standard when it comes to support. So that's my story. I won't bore you with anything else. You can ask any questions. But thank you for listening.
Thank you. So again, don't go away. I'd like you to come and join us up here on the stage now, Sandy and Pete and Paul. Jonathan, you opted to sit this one out, but if you've got any contributions to make from the floor or any questions, please ask. So what do you think of the show so far? Yeah, good? You enjoying it? Brilliant. So I've got a whole bunch of questions because, you know, I'm a nosy journalist. That's kind of my job. But I've got a few things arising out of each of your chats. So one thing, Sandy, you mentioned about diversity, you know, working on the Iceland account and having Iceland customers working for it. Have you found something similar when you've employed apprenticeships, not from that middle class, university educated cohort that's diversified your agency to make you produce better work?
Yes, although it's important to add that it's not a silver bullet. I think sometimes people can conflate the two things together and think we want greater diversity, so the answer is apprenticeships. Apprenticeships is a big part of that because it does give you access to a different talent pool. But I guess a business wanting to drive greater diversity needs more of a diversity strategy attached to it. But I think it absolutely does to exactly that point. And again, diversity is it's a multifaceted thing. It gets, people talk about diversity being about ethnicity or about religion or about gender or about sexuality or whatever. But it's also, to the point that you were discussing previously, it is about different experiences, different world experiences. And it does, it does open up the doors to our industry, to a whole raft of different people who perhaps wouldn't have thought that they were eligible for it.
Fantastic. Pete, Paul, can I come to you now? I want to ask a few more things about the questions that might be burning in people's minds. What are the government incentives? What are the nuts and bolts of actually hiring an apprentice? What are the barriers that you often hear people coming to you with saying they're not going to take an apprentice on for this reason? And how do you overcome those objections from employers and overcome those barriers to them going down this route with you?
Yeah, well, the main one we hear is the expectations of an apprentice is a school leaver. They're 18 years old, no experience, and our oldest one is 50 in the 50s, so 56. We have 25% of our apprentices over the age of 25. So so that's that it's a misconception that apprentices are young and they don't have any experiences. One of our first ever apprentices was a lad who, when he saw him, you were like, he's not going to get a job. But actually, when we drilled down into his experiences, what he had, he didn't know what he wanted to do with his career. But when we actually quizzed him about what did he do outside of school and college? Well, he was a Clash of the Clans expert, and he had a YouTube channel which had 250,000 subscribers, and every Friday night he would do a live broadcast with 80,000 people logging on, and he'd organise competitions and players from around the world. I'm like, that is what agency will want, that in abundance. And he's gone on to great strengths because actually he couldn't see that what he was doing and his passions, he could portray that into a business world. He just didn't think that he was never good at school. He didn't get any qualifications, and he just didn't think he had a chance. And he did. He did have a chance. And a lot of these apprentices do. Going to university, we've said, isn't the be all and end all.
Yeah, it's not for everyone.
It is, yeah, my kids, my daughter asked me last week, should I go to university? Well, yeah, if you want to go to university, go to university. Enjoy your life. But it's not the be all and end all, and people that want to get onto the careers can go down that route and get on with the careers. But also there is an opportunity to get a foot in the door with little experience. And if you've got the drive and tenacity and the ability to develop yourself, and with your employee.
So talk me through though a little bit of the nuts and bolts of it. We'll be brief on this one, I promise you. It won't be too technical. Maybe Sandy could come in at this as well. The apprenticeship levy, how does that work? That's a tax on 0.5% of payroll, as I understand it, for businesses with a large turnover. Presumably that would apply to Dentsu, would it?
So you've got a £3 million salary bill, and that's put on it, which is about 107 employees on average salary bills. So you would either levy pay it, and that comes out of your levy pot. So the apprenticeship is funded through that pot. And if you're a non-levy payer, i.e. under 3 million salary, then it's 95% funded by the government. Right. So, for an £11,000 digital marketing programme, it's a £550 contribution to put an apprentice on. If the person can have, there's no national insurance contribution for the employer, so there's a saving there. And there are some incentives from the government if you're under 18 or below. So there are incentives there.
Yeah. What about regulation though? You have those horrible Ofsted inspections, right?
We had Ofsted in last week, so we quite bruised by that from last week. It went really well, so unfortunately I can't tell you the result because we're bound by 30 days.
But we will be telling you soon.
We will be, yes. So we're everything's audited and regulated by Ofsted. Like any school or university provision, we have to adhere to certain things. We have to safeguarding, making sure that the apprentices in a safe environment, the health and safety, and lots of other things which Apprentify take on. There's very little interruption to an employer because we take that on as a process.
Yeah. Sandy, how's it worked for you then, working with these guys?
They're brilliant because they do. That's exactly what they do. They really know their. I said apples earlier. I was going to say onions. Well, let's invert the food group, and they just know what they're on about. And so they enable us to we just focus on the training side of things. Yeah. But for the employers, they don't even have to worry about any of that because these guys will be able to advise and help. And so the paperwork is minimal. And one of the things that some employers hear about is this 20% off the job training thing. So for an apprentice who works in your business, they are employed like any other of your members of your team, but they have to spend 20% doing training off the job. But even that, within the Jewish Academy, within Apprentify, we try and make that practical as well. So it's not just an admin task or an academic task. So, for instance, as an example, if they have to do an audience analysis project, well, let's make it an audience analysis about one of your clients. So it actually works. It's not just a thing that goes in their portfolio as a tick box exercise. So because Apprentify know about our sector, they make those things as practical as possible. Whereas I know some of the other apprentice providers that I've had experience of in the past, it's very much an academic exercise. They don't really understand the business side of things. So that's just really important.
Yeah, yeah. Are there professional qualifications that this, because also as an employer, there'll be all sorts of skills levels, level 1, level 2, level 3, that kids come through schools. Degrees are level 6, I believe. Is that right? Do the skills and the qualifications that apprentices working with any of you learn, do they accrue towards a next level of a professional skill?
Yeah. So, for instance, it was just yesterday. We do a level 3, which is kind of pretty much entry level, but people can go straight on from that to a degree apprenticeships. And actually, one of the people who was at the boot camp yesterday, Lydia, she started with us 5 years ago, working at BDB in Altrincham. She did a level 3 with us, and then she went on to MMU to do a degree apprenticeship, and she's just graduated. And then she was back yesterday to get her own apprentice to work with her.
Oh,
so that's nice.
Yeah. Which employer did she do that through? Through BDB?
BDB, yeah. She's still with them
brilliant.
5 years later, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So just tell me a little bit more then about the relationship with the training provider. Brian, could I get you to explain a little bit about how that whole interaction works? You know, when you get somebody who applies, comes to work for you, how that works and how you guide them through the system, kind of a typical day, if such a thing exists. In agency land, I'm sure
the
it
wrong
doesn't.
person to ask, actually. I think, look, from our point of view, all I can give you is my experience of it as a small to medium size business. And I think for us, that was the most attractive part. We knew our weakness was in training. We've had that feedback in the past. I think you're running a business is hard and trying your very best to look after people, but finding time to invest in training just doesn't exist. So as Sandy said, I think that 25%, we just class it as a Friday. So the way we structured our training was just to say, look, do your job Monday to Thursday, but every Friday's yours. That's your Apprentify day. And that works really well for us because then the management team know they can spend time with their team on a Friday. The employee, the apprentice knows that Friday is very much their self-investment day. And as Sandy says, we can make it practical around PPC or a client's campaign or a client's audit, and they can put that towards a portfolio. So I think, again, it's not a theoretical training program, and I'm just a rubbish learner. You know, I don't read, I'm dyslexic, I don't like reading, I can't really study that way. So for me to do it practically on the job kind of suited me as well. Yeah. So it kind of suited my way of learning. So I think that's what we've kind of driven through Venn. It's just on the job, real life, there's nothing hypothetical. This is a client account. You cannot mess this up. But take your training course, take your theories and actually put it into practice. And it actually gives them a sense of confidence, their actual ability to sit there, and they're actually quite proud of what they've done. And you can see them putting it out on their LinkedIn, they're changing their social media approach, and rather than just putting it on Facebook or Instagram, we always talk about building your own personal brand at Venn. And look, Venn won't be your career for life, I get that. But if I can help you build that personal brand and you can leave here 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line with a grandiose job title. Everyone's got a great title nowadays on LinkedIn, but the status, and it kind of makes me feel good that I was a small part of their career, and you get a lot of that from the apprenticeship program.
Yeah. A lot of you mentioned in your introductory talks about loyalty and the relationship that you will have built up with apprentices in your own businesses. Have you all got good examples? Is that generally the trend? Are apprentices more loyal than graduates who you've recruited to your businesses? Sandy?
Well, I mean, there's obviously, you have, in any employment situation, you have highs and lows. But yeah, I mean, we've got apprentices who have been with us since cohort 1, which must mean they've been with us 9 years.
Yeah.
And now they are training in the academy themselves. So they're trainers and they're running their own teams. But then you have some that come and they're just not the right fit and they leave like any other member of staff. And I think the biggest difference, I suppose, with the younger side of things, and it's probably the same with grads, is that age, you haven't got a clue really what you want to be. I mean, by profession, I'm a nursery nurse. I don't even have kids, you know. So you don't really know at that age what your career is going to be. And I tried, like you, I tried lots of different things until I literally fell into marketing, and it was like the sun coming out from behind a cloud. It was absolutely brilliant, but it took me a while. And I think that's the same. We've had apprentices halfway through the program decide they want to be a midwife. And I'm like, well, I can't help you with that, to be fair. So, but that's the same with any employment. But I think when they do fit and they do work, they do tend to hang around, in my experience, a lot longer than grads who almost have this path where they say, I'm going to be with you for 3 years and then I'm going to go and look for something else. And then they sometimes come back, which is nice. But the apprentices don't seem to have that same mindset.
Yeah. Pete, can I ask you about that journey in an enormous, multi-faceted agency like yours?
I think I would say I'm going to sit on the fence, and I don't know that I could necessarily say one type of person is more loyal than any other type of person. But I think, look, how loyal your staff are to you is entirely dependent on what you put into your staff. Right?
There's a lot of other moving parts.
Yeah, there are, and my gut feel is there's nothing about an apprentice that makes them more likely to be loyal than anybody else, because we're talking about if you've got your recruitment process right, you're talking about recruiting ambitious people who want to grow themselves and develop their career. If you can keep providing them the pathway to do that, then you'll get loyalty. If you can't, then you're going to lose them like you would any other member of staff. You've got to be sticky. But I think what I would say is that you have to recognise the kind of the pathway for an apprentice is going to be different to a pathway to a graduate. It's going to be different to a pathway to an experienced member of staff, and develop the relationship with the individual along those lines, in order to be able to develop them and pass them through. And that's what we've learned. I think that's the journey that we've been on, is kind of, on day one, it's like an apprentice and a grad, they're exactly the same-ish. Let's see what happens. And they're not. So we've adapted and developed our kind of way of bringing apprentices into our business as a result, and having great success. I mean, as I say, our academy program is less than a year old, so it remains to be seen how we do with that. But I think it's more of a question for an employer as a whole, is how do you make yourself sticky to your staff?
Yeah, about creating a culture, isn't it? Culture of learning and development.
100%.
Yeah, can I just add one point?
Yeah, please.
The hashtag tomorrow's talent. I mean, I think that sums it up. Look, you've got to cultivate.
Yeah, please use the hashtag if you want to share what a great event this is.
See how I got that in there.
Yeah.
But I do actually agree with that. I think you've got to cultivate what Pete's saying there. It's not that the grad or the apprentice is any more loyal or not. It's about cultivating a career path for them. They're not daft. They've joined your business, and it's our responsibility as employers to help coach them, provide that path. So I was going to say, loyalty comes if you're loyal to them, and if you can keep coaching them through and just keep showing them the next stage they can get to, they do stay, because they can genuinely see it. So it is about tomorrow's talent. If you can say, look, this is where you're going to be 12 months, another 12 months. But again, I think a lot of employers, partly because of the pandemic and what we've lived through recently, your heads are just down in panic mode, but you've got to force yourself up and say there will be no future if we don't inspire that generation. So no matter how stressed you are as a business leader, you've got to occasionally keep on motivating them, because they'll do the work to get you to the next stage, is what we've experienced anyway. Yeah.
So I'm going to come out to you for questions, if you've got questions for the employers, before I bring the apprentices up to give their side of the story, which is going to be really, really interesting. But I do, before I come to questions from the audience, so I'm not going to spring it on anybody. Paul, could I just ask you, it's really interesting dynamic here, that nobody's kind of selling this as an opportunity because it's dirt cheap and the government will subsidise you and you can get these people in and it don't cost the business any money. No one's emphasising that at all. But do you sometimes have those difficult conversations with employers who come to you for the wrong reasons, that actually...
Yeah, I mean, we set our stall up quite early on, because when Apprentify were first started, you could employ an apprentice on £7,200 a year.
Yeah.
And that was a minimum salary for an apprentice. It's now just over 9,000, which is nothing, and especially in today's world. So we sat with our employers. We say that we won't work with an employer that doesn't pay more than £14,000 minimum salary.
Okay.
Because we just think that's a reasonable expected salary. And actually, we have lots of employers that pay much more than that because they see the value in it. But we do have some employers that come and say, I've heard that we can employ them for £9,000 and I want 10 of them and I want the incentive. And that straight away sets to us that the wrong reasons and the intent for doing this. Yeah. Because what we also want is we want it to be right for the apprentice. We want it to be right for the employee and the agency. That's the crux of why we do this. But it's about making sure that the apprentice has a good career and has a livable wage. I don't think not many. I mean, Brian has mentioned the cost effectiveness of it earlier, but it's about getting the right talent. Because if you're doing this for saving money, or it's the wrong thing. It's about the future proofing your business to getting the right talent, because that talent, once it's developed and it's in the right place in the next 2 or 3 years, as Brian says, they're the people who are going to drive the business. They're going to be the people that are going to take the headaches off the leaders, because they're going to be the drivers for the future. And hopefully the business leaders' future. And as Sam says, the people will be coming back for their own. I mean, that's a great story that you've had an apprentice that's then gone on to an apprenticeship degree, now coming back for their own apprentices. What a great story that is.
Yeah, cycle of life.
It is a cycle, and it's not about cheap salaries. Yeah. And listen, it's a great byproduct of it all, because it is cost effective. Don't get me wrong. And you can save your national insurance and you can get a bit of an incentive if you're under 18. But that's what it shouldn't. It shouldn't be about that. It should be about developing your business.
Cool. Right, questions from the audience. Come on. Hopefully you've got a few. Hi. Introduce yourself by all means.
I'm Lee. So I'm a digital director at an agency called Manifest Group, and I also run a series of events across the North called Social North, which I actually use some of the apprentices from use the Academy for our content team to know how valuable and great they are. So thank you for that. I just wanted to ask a question about, we talk about diversity, but I want to talent in terms of reaching people that are outside of Manchester, Newcastle, Liverpool. But I'm a Bradford lad who had to go to Leeds to start my career, and I live in St Helens, but I work in Manchester. So whether it's how we Apprentify do it or how we should do it, how do we go further than Manchester, Leeds, Newcastle, the kind of central populaces, to go further?
I mean, we always talked about, because we were classroom based, the Juice Academy was a physical thing. And we always talked about whether we could do that. How can we do that? How can we do it? Wringing our hands. And COVID comes along. Within a week, we're online and we're doing it, and the apprentices are absolutely fine. So COVID broke a lot of things in a good way, actually. So we were able to all of a sudden start offering apprenticeships anywhere across across England, actually, not the UK, because it's different rules in Wales and Scotland. And so now we've got apprentices in London, we've got apprentices in Newcastle, Birmingham, and what we're doing now, it's back in the classroom, it's hybrid. So the apprentices in other areas, they come in, and we've got the tech that means that they can be part of that discussion. And then we require them to come up at least twice a year so that they can meet their fellow alumni and be part of the practical sessions. So we now do that. And in terms of how we do it, how we dig into those, there's a million things. It's not easy. It's literally ringing schools, ringing colleges, ringing local charities. It's not a digital thing. We obviously do a lot of social media ourselves because we've got the brand now, but it's rolling your sleeves up and having to find the people.
Yeah, and going to other locations. You'll have to do that as well.
Yeah, well, I think we're having a conversation right now with Paul about different locations around the country. I mean, I think this was always one of we've worked with a few different apprentice providers, and I think this was always the one, not sticking point, but the challenge was about one part of the job is obviously providing exceptional training, coaching, support for apprentices. That's a really important thing. But the second is acting almost as a recruitment channel, which Apprentify can do for us. We can give them a brief and they can go and find us a cohort of apprentices to come in. And one of the conversations we're having is saying, look, we don't think we're doing enough to leverage all of our locations around the country. What if we give you a brief to help us to build an academy of people in Newcastle? So we start having an intelligent conversation around what does a recruitment strategy look like for this particular location? How are we going to go about doing that? What competition have we got in some of those locations? So, you know, we haven't pushed start on that, but it's clearly possible. I guess that's the thing. You know, that's just from working with these guys. You can have a sensible conversation to say, as a business, we want to do this. Here's a brief. Can you help us to do it? And then we have an honest conversation about how practical it is, what's going to be involved, what we need to do, what Paul and the team can do for us. So yeah, I would imagine Paul would welcome a brief for any location, I would have thought.
Well, yeah, some locations are easier than others,
but never say never to anything. Yeah.
No, and Pete's given us some, you know, Stafford, is one. It's a tough location. It's a tough location because the population isn't huge in Stafford, and you know, and we've got apprentices that, you know, we were sort of talking about one earlier on that came from Newcastle on the line. You know, travels down every day. And it's done really well. So, you know, so we can find apprentices, you know, across England. And you know, Brian said, you know, the world's changed. You know, we've got some employers that are totally home based, haven't got an office. It's completely remote. Some do hybrid. Some want apprentices no further than 20 miles away from the office. So, you know, so wherever the brief is, you know, we can work with. You know, when we talk about diversity, you know, we've got a digital agency in Solihull, and their remit was actually they attracted candidates from further afield, but one of their remits for us was actually we needed to place candidates within their postcode, and they weren't attracting it in Solihull because people in Solihull didn't feel like they could get a job at McCann as an agency. So actually, our remit was not to find apprentices anything wider than the local postcode, and so we had to go into schools and colleges and around and generate candidates and potential talent for within the local postcode. And it was actually really tough. You would think, oh, local postcode, dead easy. You're not asking us to be further afield, but you know, we can work on any location and certain diversity sort of requirements.
Fantastic. Any more questions? Yes, hi. Social Chain, aren't you?
Yeah.
Hi, what's your name?
I'm Laura and I'm HR Director at Social Chain. This is Leah. She also works with me. So I've just got a question about actually onboarding apprentices and setting them up for success. We have had quite a few apprentices over the years. You know, I'm happy to say with mixed success. And I think obviously, you know, partially that's going to be down to us in terms of our capabilities and actually making sure we've got the infrastructure in place to support them. And as many of you have mentioned, you know, we're in an agency world, everything goes at 10 million miles an hour. You've barely got time to breathe sometimes, and resources are a real struggle for us at the moment. So it's having a knock-on effect. Our line managers have barely got time to support their own teams, let alone give dedicated support to apprentices. So I think, you know, we're really looking at how we can build an apprenticeship scheme for next year that's going to help set us up for the future. But one of the things that we're really keen on looking at is how we can make sure that there's an appropriate induction process for them into the business when it's so damn hard to find the time. To anyone?
So I'll take that one first. So we work with the employers. So, you know, so obviously, you know, of course we do, but every employee is different. You know, some employers will just onboard them as normal. Others have very, very, you know, intense requirements and needs. You know, and it's not just on the onboarding; it's throughout the program. So, for example, JD Sports that we put apprentices in, Black Friday and in and around that period is a no-go. So we have to extend and change the program to fit, you know, certain, you know, annual or sort of, you know, times in the months or even in the year where employers need their staff to be focused, whether that's Christmas, Black Friday, whether it's induction. So we work very closely with the employers to put in specific requirements, and whether that's more touch points, whether that's more face-to-face, whether that's different ways of communicating with the apprentices to make sure that the process is as slick as possible. any onboarding for any employee is tough. But we work with employers to design something that's right. If the numbers are big enough, it's totally bespoke. So yeah.
I'd probably add to that. I think the thing I've learnt most is the management layer. I think people perceive success as getting to management. And I think sometimes your best execs or your best salespeople or your best marketing strategists don't become the best managers. They were phenomenal at what they did. And then suddenly they've got to care about this team. And it's the default of the business to put them in that position, right? You're ready, you're becoming a manager. So I think it's a dead interesting question you asked. How can we set up for success? To me, get that management team ready. It's a thing we're heavily investing in Venn at the moment. We were suffering that success because the managers were taking on all the strain and all the stress and they were working all these hours, but the apprentices were doing 9 to 5. And I'm like, listen, something's not right here. But they were giving no time back to the apprentices, so they were feeling left out. So I think the two ways I'd answer that in my own experience was get the managers to completely buy into this tomorrow's talent culture. If you treat these people well, if you invest in them, take them for a beer, have lunch with them, actually get to know their living situation. Again, we've had people flat sharing, they're miserable, and they're just so, but not with a career, actually their home life. So I think it's getting a connection with your management team to say, look, these guys will make your lives much better if you actually look after them and pay attention to them. Because sometimes they're just so stressed, so busy, and they're focused on their own fires, they actually forget these guys need support. So I think that'd be my first thing. And the second thing we've done, she sat in the room actually, Fiona. So various titles in our business, but ultimately she's been the go-to. She's not the HR director. That's quite a scary, I'm going to go have a meeting with the HR director, I'm going to have a coffee. It's like, oh. I think having that person you can go and confide in, just chat to, just say, I'm having a shit day. I just don't feel great. And often it's me. It's talking to Fiona having a shit day. But the guys have confided in her a lot. And it's brilliant because they've got her trust. And Fiona genuinely chooses the conversation to then come and tell me about. A lot I don't actually hear about, but I want to know when I can make a difference because they won't approach me. I'm the chief exec. I'm the big scary guy in the corner. I'm Scottish and aggressive and they won't talk to me. Job titles are scary, especially when you're 18, 19, 21. So I think the second thing is having some sort of coach, secret squirrel in the business that they can go and talk to. Secret squirrel. Sorry, Fiona, you're now a secret squirrel. I've called you worse.
I know that Georgia and the Juice Academy's done a lot of work on onboarding, especially during COVID. As you can imagine, it was even harder, obviously, to onboard people. So if you want to, I can connect you and she can share a lot. I know we haven't got a lot of time.
Really, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just going to add one more point to that. I think almost think along 3 axes. What do you want them to be doing operationally? Therefore, what training do you need to provide? Therefore, what kind of people do you need to recruit? Because look, there's a million and one ways to train people. You can put on a big fancy pants training program like we've done when we're trying to do it on a big scale, or you can dump them with an experienced team and they can learn on the job. If you're busy and if if it seems overwhelming to produce a massive big training program, it just doesn't look possible. Don't half-ass that because you'll regret that. But there's nothing wrong with sticking an apprentice in with a group of experienced people, like we were talking about there. If you stick them next to an exec or whatever, who can coach them and train them to do stuff. But if that's what you're going to do, then that needs to feed your recruitment strategy. You need to recruit sort of people who are, full of ambition, really entrepreneurial, really keen to roll their sleeves up and get stuck in and give it a go. As long as you can align those 3 things back to what you can operationally see these people doing in your business, you'll be fine.
Yeah. Fantastic. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Seem to. Yeah, good. Maybe got time for one more question, or I'll maybe bring the apprentices up. One more question? No burning issue? Great. I think it's time for you to give these guys a round of applause. So thank you very much. So Brian, Sandy, Pete and Paul. So are you sitting comfortably? Maybe I should come and join you. Come on my stool up here. So introduce yourselves. You're Claire.
I am Claire.
Yeah, and who you doing your apprenticeship with?
So I'm with the Juice Academy, so I'm doing it through those guys.
Yeah.
And I'm at North Coders at the moment, so that's just across the way.
Fantastic. Now, Elliot, at the end, you're with North Coders as well, aren't you?
Yes, both working for North Coders under the Juice Academy.
Fantastic. And in the middle, James.
I work for Dentsu, just on Portland Street, across the way as well.
Great. So tell us individually, I'll start at the end with you, Elliot. Tell us your apprenticeship journey, your career story, because I think one of the issues that Sandy mentioned in her talk was about the diversity of the workforce and the different people that brought in. I've had the advantage of meeting some of these guys before, so I know a little bit about their story. Don't say to me, as I was telling you earlier, because it's for the benefit of everybody here. But Elliot, do you want to just tell us your career story? Because you've amazing experiences for a young lad.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's probably not the most common situation to be in, but I've been, as I'm only 23 years old, I've actually been working for 10 years. Started working when I was 13 with a family-run business in agriculture for about 6 years, and then moved on naturally from that to machine operation, one in the steel industry and one in the paper and plastic bag industry. And it was working in those set or series of jobs that actually I just I was in the middle. I think it was the third job where I was in the paper and plastic factory where, for lack of a better word, I just thought, I hate this job so much. And I wanted a change, and but it got me thinking what I wanted to change, what I wanted to do with my life instead of this, because this was sort of a very, like a lot of young people do, they're very sort of on autopilot. They'll just sort of, I was lucky to get the opportunity that I was given at such a young age. As much as I did not like the job at all, it did give me that employability, it did give me that work experience, and it ultimately influenced my decision to come to the Juice Academy to do this apprenticeship.
Yeah. So did you have sort of a lot of other extracurricular digital interests that drew you down that pathway?
Yeah, definitely. I've always been big into video editing. Very, very sort of amateurish stuff I did make since 2013, 2014. None of it really went public. But I've always had that sort of interest, creative as well, like sound design, dabbled in music production, dabbled in art, animation, all that sort of stuff. I've always been into that, and I feel like with the opportunities that Apprentify has presented, it's just been really good for me and anyone like me who's looking to get or break into that sort of industry.
Great. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about what you've learned and how you've developed your skills and career. James, tell me a little bit about your career story.
Right, so I come from a finance background originally. So came out of college doing accountancy. Worked at a couple of accountancy practices in Manchester, mainly for like bands and DJs. So accountancy is not really very exciting, but that was like, I don't know, probably exciting. You're going to get it really.
Which ones?
John Child & Co. So I did that for a while.
Which DJs? Come on, drop some music.
Oh, right, DJs. We looked after like Badly Drawn Boy, Cortinas, Embrace, basically anyone who's coming into Manchester, like John managed to get hold of him. So had Michelle Keegan in there, that kind of thing. So I did that for a while.
Some names he's been dropping.
You started.
I started.
So I did that for a while. Meanwhile, I've always been a resident DJ at the local club, and my friend ended up buying this club. It's where we live in Glossop. It's only like a 400 capacity place. Anyway, the opportunity came around for me to get involved in that, so I left the accountancy world and got involved in this nightclub. So I've been running that for the last 10 years.
Wow.
And then obviously COVID happened. We're in a bit of a pickle really. So I did all the marketing at the club, all that kind of stuff. So that was like the main transferable skills that I thought I want to look at something. But at 35 at the time. I don't know, you feel like the ship sailed a bit and you're a little bit left behind with all these whippersnappers, everyone's fresh out of uni and everything. So I was looking for an apprenticeship because when I do something, I like to learn the fundamentals of it.
Yeah.
So that's why I really want to do an apprenticeship, and I think that's why Apprentify is brilliant for someone, an old boy like me. It's good to get into.
It's quite a story, that, isn't it? Yeah. So Claire, you're a graduate, aren't you? So tell us your story.
So I graduated from Newcastle University in 2017, and I sort of stayed in the city because I really enjoyed it, and worked as an artist and had a couple of jobs, sort of part-time things, so that I could basically afford to live there. But none of them were I was super passionate about. So I kind of got to the point where I was in lockdown, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I need to make a change. And I think that resonates with a lot of people, because it gave us so much time to think.
What did you do your first degree in?
Oh, so that was fine art. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it was like a 4-year course with Newcastle Uni, and I really enjoyed it. I'm not super academic, so I think I failed possibly the first 2 years exams, and then managed to pull it all back. So I graduated okay by the end of it. But it wasn't always plain sailing, and I also found out during that I was dyslexic. So it was a lot later on that I got that information. But yeah, so that's kind of what I've been.
Yeah. And so tell me about the apprenticeship that you're doing now.
So during lockdown, I was wanting to use my skills to work in something that was creative, and so I started researching sort of crossover subjects, so I could learn how to actually make these things more make creative work that was more applicable and used in the actual world. Yeah. So I started doing that and finding sort of educational resources online.
Is that how you came across Juice Academy?
Actually, I found Juice Academy later. So that was in Newcastle, but I moved down to Manchester, which is where I started looking around here as well. And then saw Juice Academy's name pop up all over the internet as the place to go to. So that was something I knew I wanted to go and do. Yeah.
Brilliant. So I'll come to you then, Elliot. What would you say is the most important thing that you've learned in the time that you've been an apprentice? How's it changed you and enriched you?
It's a good question. I would probably say that it's definitely broadened my horizons in the sense that I mean, not even a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, I thought I could be doing the things that I'm doing now to be attending the events that I am today. And the flexible work opportunities that I've got given, obviously working in agriculture, you're in at 6, you're gone at 6, 12 hours later, and that's on a good day. You don't really have a choice around that. But the fulfillment that I get from working in this job, being as it's something I've always wanted to do since I was young and bright-eyed and everything, it's basically just taught me that I can do these things. It's the opportunity it's not like it's not there. It's not like it's never going to be there. And I think a lot of people, probably at least at my age, don't actually know that, don't realise that. They feel like university is, or whatever their parents might pressure them to do, is the only option, and that's absolutely not true.
I think what all of you demonstrate is that life isn't a straight line, is it? It can go off in all sorts of different directions. James, you included with all the different things that you've done. So talk me through how it's gone with that kind of formalisation. So obviously you were doing a bit of digital marketing when you were managing the club in Glossop and marketing it, obviously, digitally. Has that been a transformation? Did you realise loads of things that you were doing wrong before, that you'd maybe give advice to future clients of your agency, that they make it up as they go along sometimes, that actually they do need that professionalism and that systematic approach?
I think most people in small businesses, they're self-taught in anything like that. So I was just on YouTube and just, following influencers and stuff like that, how you do certain things. So a lot of the stuff that I was doing with the club was all self-taught. And then, as soon as you come into something like this, you just realise the profession, and just how much wider everything is and how much more in depth everything is. It's totally different, really.
Yeah. Claire, what would you say the most important life-changing new skill experience that you've had in the time that you've been with North Coders?
I would say that it's given me the opportunity to try everything and be really encouraged to try lots of different things, which is really nice. So for instance, I wrote my first piece of copy, which was published on the internet. And for me, writing it's always been quite difficult. Yeah. So it was really nice, and I felt very encouraged to do that and very supported. And I think obviously meeting people, going to events and hearing what people actually think. So events like this and obviously Social North as well is super interesting to go and just get kind of a better understanding of how digital marketing is going on.
Yeah, and often there's a stigma around apprentices that or a bit of a hierarchy in an organisation, that you're not like the established staff who've been there a long time. Do you feel valued and part of the team at North Coders?
Yeah, it's a very encouraging space, and people are sort of very authentically interested in how you're progressing through your course and what you're doing, and they sort of check in with you, and it's a very friendly environment. So I feel very comfortable and confident there.
James, do you feel different to the other people, the other apprentices?
I feel older, yeah.
You feel older. Yeah, but you bring something else from your own experiences, obviously.
Yeah, obviously a massive culture shock for me to going back into a 9 to 5.
Right.
But yeah, it's a very, very inclusive space at Dentsu.
Well, you did work 9 to 5 before, it was just 9 at night.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's a different kind of 9 to 5. But yeah, a very inclusive space. And I think they hire really well. Everyone's just really, really nice there. Yeah, I'd support across the board. So yeah, can't fault any of it. It's spot on, really.
Yeah. Elliot?
Yeah, I can't really word it better than how you did, Claire, to be honest, because it was really well said. I could probably only add to that I do feel valued as part of the team, as in the content that we've put out. We do herald it. We've had a lot of people come from, I won't go into too much detail, we've had a lot of people come from different companies and say, well, the companies we've been working for, bearing in mind the ones that are very similar to the work that we're doing, they have actually said quite recently, just for in terms of marketing, just copy North Coders. Just copy North Coders. And I was just amazed to hear that. I was like, wow. Well, like even if it's not like said directly to me, it's like, our work is being valued, at least, outside of the company, all sorts, really.
That must be hugely rewarding.
Yeah, so it's sort of not really sunk in yet. I'm sort of sitting there like, I don't know, maybe saying it to make me feel better. But no, that's just sort of part of the confidence building, getting further along into it.
Brilliant.
Sure, and I feel like I've learned a lot from my other teammates as well, more importantly. Like I did not know anything about SEO probably about 2-3 months ago, and we've got a team member now who's very, very keen to sort of just answer any questions I've got and teach me anything I need to know about SEO, and hopefully then I can tailor the content that I produce towards that.
Brilliant. Now, I've got one more question for you, which I'll ask in a sec. But if you have got any questions, please put your hand up if you want to ask these any questions about their experiences. I'll come to you in a minute. I just did that because usually if you say, have you got any questions, no hands go up. But no, go on, you ask your question and I'll ask mine later.
It's just obviously you guys are so invested in your careers, and we have quite a lot of apprentices through our financial by the way, and we're for a marketing agency called Straight In. And the problem we found recently is that they're so invested in their jobs, which we love. We don't think they're as engaged in their courses as they should be. And I don't know if you guys, like how your employees really help you to properly integrate and make sure that balance was right, and making sure they wanted to make sure that they do love the content, and they're like, it's my work, more important, and trying to get that engagement on both sides has been a bit more tricky recently. I just didn't know how you guys found that balance on both sides of that.
You okay, Elliot? Do you want to answer that first?
Yeah, I suppose I could. It's actually quite a good one for me to answer because I feel like I've had that sort of problem myself. I can relate a lot. I've had times. Usually, it's my own fault that maybe slightly poorer time management than the average person. But I definitely feel like we've had enough time. We've had enough support. We continue to get more enough support to do the work that we need to do in regards to the course and the actual apprenticeship itself. I can't really say anything more than that because I feel like the Apprentify and the Juice Academy, they've done a phenomenal job with that. I really do think that the time we've been given, like the study day in the middle of the week and that we get every single week, I personally couldn't ask for more. I think it works for me really well. So
you think you got the balance right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like so anyway.
James, Claire, would you?
Yeah, similar. My line manager's just really, really flexible. So obviously the workload now as I start to integrate into the team, or there is more workload coming my way. But a lot of the time on the one-to-ones, you said, how are you finding it? Everything good? And just you pick and choose where you take that 20% really. So it's just so flexible. It just works really.
Yeah. Claire?
I would say that I had points where I would notice it popping up and needing to catch up in certain areas, but speaking to line managers, they're like, it's okay, you can do this, and very sort of very open to a discussion about working out a time for you to finish off work that you need help with, and if they can lend any thoughts or expertise, then that's really handy as well, because they do often sort of offer that up, which is lovely.
Any more questions? Yeah.
And yeah, so each of you from very different backgrounds and environments. So when you've gone into your current work environment, what was the most surprising thing, and what either could or did the employer do to help you settle into that culture change?
Great. How's the employer helped you settle in? Go to you first, Elliot.
Yeah, can do. It's a bit of a weird one for me because before North Coders, I was at a place called Drop the Hammer for the first 3 months of my apprenticeship, and since then the company has dissolved. But I did learn. It actually acted really well for me as like a transitionary period between working, because before this apprenticeship I was working. Well, I was working on the farm, and then I was working in the factory. You can imagine the kind of work environment that might be. So transferring from that into an office work environment, it's honestly, it felt as really seamless. My employers, we had a lot of meetings to try and get things introduced, getting the ball rolling, a lot of communication. I suppose that's the answer really, it's communication. There was a lot of communication, it still continues at North Coders as well. It's same goes for both places I was working at. There's nothing wrong with either of them. But the communication's there. If you need to ask a question, you can. If you need anything, you can get it. You can, so long as you just ask.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of that was missing from the old industries I used to work in.
Interesting. Claire, is that the same for you in North Coders?
Yeah, I'd say that what I've found is that, like, starting there, because obviously I had a similar setup where the company I was like working in a placement at, unfortunately their marketing department got dissolved halfway through my apprenticeship. So I was kind of found in an environment where I had to like start again almost halfway through it. And I wasn't, obviously it kind of leaves you on the back foot and you're like, oh no, I don't know if this is going to work. And Juice were really supportive, and I managed to get an interview with North Coders, which is where I started working. When I was there, they were like so patient with me and like encouraging, and would sort of sit and be like, this is how we're going to do this. This is, we're going to show you how to edit this video, and sort of walk me through the process. So it didn't feel like it felt quite natural, and I felt very like involved in it, and I can feed back into it as well. So I feel like they've balanced that quite nicely.
Brilliant. James, same for you?
Yeah, well, I come into the Dentsu Academy, so I was cohort 3. So I think there was 12 of us that came in. So it was just like going to a little family, and then you had your trainer, but you spent every day with these people. So it wasn't like you were just going in as like the newbie on your own into a big, scary place. You had 12 people who were in the same boat as you. So I thought that was really good integration into something as big as Dentsu. And then obviously each transition to your own team from there. So yeah, I thought that was really, really good side of it.
Great. Right, Lee, you can have the last question before I ask mine, and conscious of the fact the pies have arrived. So,
very short question. I was, so you answered some of this, it might be a really quick one. I was wondering more from a learning point of view, because again, the dual role I have with Manifest, I have the curriculum when I work for apprentices, and I can sit down, watch videos, teach things, exactly. Whereas as Claire knows in Social North, when you do the Newcastle event, I was like, we're doing the event, takes 4 hours, here's a brief. And I was wondering what learning styles, what you prefer, or maybe it's just a hybrid, but do you prefer the kind of freedom to explore, or the, I'm going to take you down a critical path of steps?
Cool. So very, very brief answers then. Preferred learning style, Claire?
I would say a blend.
Yeah. James?
Yeah, I'll go blend as well.
I have to be original and also say blend. I feel like it really does depend on the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fair point. My final question, you all come from really, really interesting backgrounds. You've had lots of different interests that led you to where you are. It seems really important to maintain those interests, for you to keep being the interesting, balanced people that you are. Are you carrying on doing that? Are you still doing your art? Are you still DJing? Are you still doing your videoing? But sort of outside of your work, have you got the capacity to do it?
Yeah, outside of work, I am trying to branch into things. I'm more focusing on my professional at the moment, but also trying to splice that creativity into it. Like Adobe After Effects is something I've been wanting to learn since I was about 15. And I never really got the chance to, because obviously, you go with Adobe, you've got the Creative Suite you've got to pay for. That is now provided by North Coders. And I feel like I've got the opportunity to teach myself how to do that now. And I am starting to break into that myself. Blender is another one. I did write a blog about that that's on the Juice Academy website. But if no one knows what Blender is, it's a open source, free to use piece of software on You can use, I think, on PC, Mac, and Linux. I'm not 100% sure though. But it's completely free. You don't have to pay anything. You can 3D model on it, draw, sculpt, texture. If you want to learn anything like that, CGI wise, it's really sparked my interest in it again, basically. Because I was into it when I was a teenager, and then when I was working in the factory, I lost interest, and now I'm doing this again.
Brilliant.
It's come back, basically.
That's really good. James, are you still DJing?
Well, took some time off, obviously, through COVID and what have you, but yeah, I just got booked for a gig.
You didn't do Playgraves then?
Say again?
You didn't do Playgraves?
No, we didn't do that, no. So yeah, I just got booked for a gig in November, and we're going to start running events again. So yeah, going to start getting back out again.
Fantastic. Glenn, you still doing your art?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Fantastic. It's an artist, eh?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's good because it's like a nice cross-pollination between two different things. So learning one thing, kind of like you said, Elliot, like it's learning one thing you can just reapply in another area through a different lens, which gives you a wider scope.
It keeps fueling your creative brain as well. Yeah, amazing. Guys, give these guys a round of applause. Fantastic.